y'all want to put anything in the chat, if you have any questions, then we'll kind of go from there. And, just reach out if you have questions. And if we can, I would appreciate it if everybody holds their questions till the end, so you're paying attention to the presentation. And then at the end, we'll answer any questions that don't get addressed. Is that a good plan with you, Ms. Coughlin?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to turn my camera off and you go for it.
All right. Thank you so much. And yes, my name is Lauren Coughlin. I'm an admissions counselor with Georgia State, but I do specialize in dual enrollment. I have a few members of our office that I work alongside. Brianna Lockhart is another colleague of mine. And then we also have a dual enrollment office. So the goal of this session is to give you the information that you need to determine whether or not if dual enrollment is right for you. Hopefully it'll help give you all the successful ways to navigate the whole application process. It is very complex. There's, of course, a lot of deadlines to keep in mind, so always take note of that. Usually the school deadlines are something you want to get ahead of before the university deadlines. So yeah, this first slide will give you some relevant staff and offices. So like I said, I work alongside Brianna Lockhart. You can definitely jot down our emails on the screen, and I can put this up later if I need to. And then the dual enrollment office. So me and Brianna kind of take care of the application and admissions process, the documents and so forth. But then once a student becomes accepted, then the dual enrollment office takes a hold of everything for you. And so they'll help you with registration, schedule changes. And so they're a great contact point as well for high school counselors. Okay, so this is also a link to our website. Definitely encourage you to check it out. Since it is so complex and we have multiple different campuses to choose from to do dual enrollment, there are specific requirements for each of those locations. So I'll kind of get into that later in the presentation, but definitely take note of our dual enrollment page where you'll see a lot of the deadlines posted there as well. All right, so just to identify dual enrollment versus joint enrollment in early college. And so dual enrollment basically allows high school students to earn college credit while working on your high school diploma, and it utilizes dual enrollment funding through the state until it's exhausted, usually after 30 credits. And so joint enrollment is an option for students after possibly exhausting all of those funds, and that's where students would pay out of pocket. And then early college is a program that we connect a little closer alongside high schools where students can still earn their college credit. It's more of a closer relationship where either we'll bring you to campus or we'll come to your school. So certain schools have that option for some students. All right, so for dual enrollment, you're going to be taking classes with traditional undergraduate students, so keep that in mind. You're going to receive high school and college credit at the same time, so that will not take away from your HOPE benefits. And courses, we get a lot of questions on this, what courses students can take. So these can be selected from the state approved list. So if you log on to Georgia Futures, you'll see exactly what courses are approved. This also kind of goes into where students want to specify something, like a major, where at Georgia State, you don't necessarily do that. So that's just because all of these courses are already approved through the state and they're pretty standardized with general ed courses. So kind of as what I was just talking about, how students are considered. So you are considered a non-degree seeking student when you apply to our program. So no major is assigned. And so don't be deterred by that. That's just because it's just those standard approved courses that students have to follow first. And then if, say, you want to pursue an associate's pathway, you can declare that major after applying for graduation. And so students can take classes during the fall, spring, and summer semesters until the funds are exhausted. So like I said, 30 credits. One perk is that you do have access to campus facilities, clubs, and student life activities. This does exclude Greek organizations, though. All right, so in terms of costs, so like I had said, dual enrollment funding is covered through the state. So tuition is covered by the Georgia Student Finance Commission. These courses, again, have to be selected from the state approved list. Anything that might not be funded through the state can be paid for out of pocket, but have to be done so at the time of registration. There could be mandatory university fees. Those are waived for students in dual enrollment as long as you have at least one or more dual enrollment funds remaining. And so just some responsibilities to keep in mind. Course specific fees. So science, foreign language might have some specific fees there. Transportation to campus, you will be responsible for that. Parking and meals. Our Atlanta campus does require students to pay for parking. And if you opt for, say, our perimeter college campuses, you would not have to pay for parking at those locations. And then textbooks. So we have the Georgia State University bookstore that will loan students required books, codes, and materials for your classes. These are free, but they must be returned at the end of each semester in good condition. And students must pick up and return those during the dates that are set by the bookstore. Otherwise, you would have to pay out of pocket for those books. All right, so some benefits of dual enrollment. So as long as you pass the course, you will receive college credit. That can differ for students if, say, I always get a lot of questions between an AP class and a dual enrollment class. You're not going to have that final exam to really be the ultimate deciding factor on whether or not if you get credit for that class. So for dual enrollment, usually as like a traditional class, you'll have 3 exams and you'll kind of know where you're at in the whole process. Whereas that last AP final exam is an ultimate deciding factor. If you don't score well in it, then you're not going to get credit. So I say it lightens the load a little bit for students when they opt for dual enrollment. And then other benefits is that there's great opportunities to grow and mature since you're taking college level courses as a high school student and also alongside other college students in the classroom that you'd be working alongside. You're going to handle college registration, requesting transcripts, so a lot of communication that you'll be having with different various departments. And of course, your college professors that you'll definitely want to be communicating with as well. So some requirements and considerations. You must be a rising junior or senior in high school. So basically, you can start dual enrollment with Georgia State during the summer after your sophomore year. So any sophomores in here right now, this summer, you can start dual enrollment with us. Of course, you want to be mindful of the deadlines, and I'll get into that later. But first and foremost, you have to obtain approval from a high school counselor and parent/guardian before taking on any of the next steps with us. And so what I'll get into shortly are the differences with Atlanta and Perimeter. Atlanta offering on-campus courses only at certain levels, and then Perimeter offering online or on-campus courses at the levels that you see there on the screen. That will make more sense a little bit later on after you apply and it can get accepted, and then when you work with our dual enrollment office on the classes that you'll select. All right, so now getting into the requirements. So both campuses, no matter if it's Atlanta or Perimeter, requires at least a 3.0 core GPA. You have to be on track to graduate and then also showing your college level readiness. And so that I'll kind of skip over because we'll get into the exact scores that are required in the next few slides. But to address that 3.0 core GPA is based on this core curriculum that you see here on the screen. So being on track to complete each and every one of these units, basically. So 4 years of English, math, natural science, and 3 years of a social science, and 2 years of the same foreign language. All right, so Perimeter Campus. And just as another FYI, those campuses for Perimeter, we have 5 different ones. So Alpharetta, Clarkston, Decatur, Dunwoody, and Newton, and also the online option. And so it is not as challenging to get accepted into the Perimeter Campus in comparison to Atlanta. The testing requirements are a little bit lower. So you'll see that on the screen here. So we'll take either an SAT, an ACT, SAT, or a PSAT. One thing to remember, if you've received any documents from us or brochures ever, it likely may not have the PSAT score listed on them. That is a fairly new thing that now that we are accepting from students. So just as a reminder of that, it's basically the same exact score requirement for the SAT. And then for perimeter as well, we can accept the AccuPlacer. So that's something the Atlanta campus does not accept. So these exams can actually be taken at one of our perimeter college campuses. So that can be arranged and scheduled weekly. We have those exams on campus for students to take. All right, now the Atlanta campus testing requirements. So like I said, a little bit higher of a requirement from students. And basically what we do to ensure to calculate if students are eligible to get into our dual enrollment program is we take this freshman index of 2,600 or higher. It's basically a calculation that we do in our admissions team and our processing team to estimate if a student will be admissible. So you can go online and search for our Panther predictor to estimate that yourself. But ultimately, we need that GPA, we need that test score. And then for deadlines to keep in mind. So excuse some of the late dates on here. Spring has now officially passed for us, but these deadlines are pretty much the same each year. So if you're looking to start for next spring, the deadline would be November 1st. For summer this year, April 1st is the deadline, and then May 1st would be the deadline for fall. So that means your application and your documents have to be on file with us. So we need those transcripts, we need those test scores. One way to expedite that process is the day you sit down and take an exam, whether if it's an SAT, ACT, or your AccuPlacer, you want to send that over to Georgia State. And also, if you're taking an AP exam and it's a class you want to get credit for, and you don't want to have to take it as a dual enrollment class, you will want to ensure that score is getting sent to Georgia State as well. So if you put our name down on that day you test, that does expedite the process a little bit better. Okay, so some student expectations to keep in mind. So you want to demonstrate high academic and personal maturity. You're going to be, in a classroom with other students, some older than you as well, and working with a professor. So being mature in those environments, and especially if you're taking an online class as well, you do want to take those seriously and make sure you're participating and actively communicating with your professor. And then being prepared for those college level courses at our research institution. So it can be rigorous in some aspects. And then communicating with your high school actively as well. And then ensuring the college courses you select also meet your high school graduation requirements. So that's something you will work with our dual enrollment office on to make sure it all matches and in the end is leaving you on track. And then also just remember your performance affects your high school GPA, your HOPE eligibility, and also college admission. So whatever grade you receive in these classes will then be the beginning of your college GPA. So that will go with you as you move forward. And say if you're applying to Georgia State or other institutions, you want to keep that in mind. And then for parents, some expectations, you want to encourage your student with their coursework. There is only limited abilities that you will have in terms of access on how well your student is doing. So a lot of that information is going to be retrieved from your student specifically. Professors and staff will not provide updates on student progress or performance in a course to parents. So students' grades will remain a part of their high school and college records. So just another reminder of that. And so kind of getting into the privacy of information for students. So FERPA is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. It is a federal law that does protect the privacy of students' education records. And so whether if a student is 18 or has begun college level courses, that is when they become an eligible student. And all of those rights that were originally given to the parent are now transferred to the student under FERPA. And so students that might be participating in dual enrollment and parents, you want to keep in mind there is a FERPA waiver that can grant access for you basically to have some information based on for your student. So making a phone call to a specific office can be doable under the FERPA waiver. All right, so some next steps. So meet with a high school counselor, discuss the deadlines, submit your dual enrollment application. You can go on our website, gsu.edu. Then you want to submit your funding application through Georgia Futures, and then submit your final paperwork by that specific deadline that you want to start classes. So transcripts and test scores must be on file by then. All right, so here's just the general contact info for each of our campuses. So you're welcome to jot this down as well. But it's usually best in terms of the application process to always contact me or Brianna first. I can put that back on the screen while we, have any questions I can answer now.
Okay, thank you so much. At this time, I'm going to go over just a couple of things. And maybe Ms. Coughlin, you can answer this for me. I know we've kind of gone back and forth about the whole PSAT thing and how to submit those scores, and you said they needed to be on high school letterhead. Where do those get sent? Can those be uploaded into Slate, or do we need to email them, or where exactly do they go?
You can send them to either me or Brianna. So our email's on the screen there. You could send to either one of us.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they go directly to you guys.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, so our registrar, so everybody listen up. If you wanted to submit your PSAT scores and you've taken it and you meet those minimums, then you have to send an email to our registrar who is in our office, and that information is on our Weebly. So I updated the Weebly the other day. You would go to the Georgia State tab and you scroll down to the bottom and it tells you who you need to email to get the PSAT score sent. It has to go directly through our registrar because counselors cannot handle an additional load of sending test scores, not for this many students. So that's one thing I want to emphasize. The other thing is I know that y'all's deadline to apply was a little bit later for fall, but Fulton County's deadline, and everybody needs to listen up, the Fulton County deadline for dual enrollment is March 31st. If you want to participate in summer or fall, the deadline is March 31. You have to submit your application to the college and upload a screenshot saying you've submitted it into Teams. And then you also have to submit the dual enrollment Fulton County contract. There's a whole contract. It's like 8 pages long. You need to go through, read all the rules, make sure you and your parent agree, and submit that into Teams. So those two things are due by March 31st. The other stuff, like the documents, the transcripts, the test scores, the other stuff can be sent at a later time. But I will caution you, the later you submit, the longer it's going to take for you to get an acceptance and to move through their process. So please know that it is best to have everything submitted as soon as possible. And then the other thing I want to emphasize is I know Ms. Coughlin talked about the Atlanta campus as an option. The Atlanta campus does not allow dual enrollment students to take any classes online. So if you want to do the Atlanta campus, then you need to make sure you have the time to go all the way down to Georgia State's Atlanta campus, park, get to school, get to your class in whatever building, could be really far up by the Rialto, and then you got to make it back to your car and back to class here if that's going to be something that's going to work for you. Or you're choosing to take all your classes downtown at Georgia State and you're not coming to Chattahoochee at all and you're going to be a full-time dual enrollment student. Or you're going to mix and match and maybe you have some classes at the Atlanta campus and you're going to do some through Fulton Virtual School or Georgia Virtual School to balance out your load. But there is no way for you to get all the way down there and all the way back in the day. That's kind of an impossible task with the traffic situation. So just know that those are the 3 highlights that I wanted to talk about. Students, if y'all have any questions, if you want to put them in the chat, and we'll kind of go from there. But those are the ones that kind of spoke to me through the presentation.
And yeah, while students input their questions, I'll add just from experience in this last start of the spring term, even though our deadline might seem late November 1st for the spring, we did, especially when it's the holidays, you can run into a lot of issues and delays. So you want to be mindful of that when you're applying and how soon you are applying. It's best to do it as soon as you can, even if our deadline might seem a little late.
Yeah.
And I did run into issues with students the week that classes started where they were trying to register just for at least one dual enrollment class, and it was classes had technically already started,
Yeah.
and they were kind of delayed in that just based on when they submitted things and how we jumped on reviewing their application. But you just want to keep in mind, the later you do it, the more it does not work in your favor. Trust me.
Absolutely. You wait till last minute. And I mean, from my experience, and I think this has been posted before, but it could take about 21 business days to process a document. And if that's the case, I mean, we're talking 3 to 4 weeks to get something processed and put into your application file. To answer some of the questions in the chat, Michaela, it says for test scores, it says to email dual enrollment at gsfu.com. I don't know who that is. Counselors, your high school counselor, the person that would send test scores is not going to be, well, we're talking about two different things. If you are sending an SAT or an ACT score, that would go through your College Board account or your ACT account. You go to College Board or you go to ACT and you submit those directly from the testing agency. The only score that the high school would be able to report are your PSAT scores. Your PSAT scores would have to be sent through the counseling office, but it will not be your counselor. It will be our registrar, Miss Mavia Leal. She is the one that would send PSAT scores. That information is on the Weebly on the GSU tab at the bottom. If you are a current 9th grader and you're thinking, oh, I can do Georgia State next year because I'll be in 10th grade. 10th graders are not eligible to take classes at Georgia State, period. You have to be a junior or a senior, okay? 10th graders are allowed to take a class at Gwinnett Tech, and if you have certain test scores, you're allowed to take an academic class, but those have to be uploaded to Georgia Student Finance Commission to get the funding. So there's two separate things going on here, and it can be a little bit confusing, but for Georgia State, only rising 11th graders and rising 12th graders are eligible. Okay, that's the first question. The second question, and you'll need to answer this one. I'm taking the SAT on March 11th. I'm not sure if I'm going to get my results by March 31st. So can I still complete the dual enrollment application, the funding application by the deadline, and submit the SAT score later?
Yeah, you can still do that. We won't, since it'll come, I'm guessing you're trying to start in the summer. Since it'll come after the April 1st, it potentially could come after the April 1st deadline. At least the test score will. We won't be able to guarantee, but we'll do our best. The fact that, as long as you have your application in and your transcripts in at least, and we're just waiting on that test score, and that day you test that you put Georgia State as a school, that will likely ensure that we get it in time. But we won't guarantee in case there could be errors and issues that might delay it a little bit longer. But I say definitely still give it a try for summer.
And I would say, I don't know if it's Parthu, if you would submit your PSAT scores, if you took it back in October, we have your PSAT scores, but you would have to have our registrar send those on your behalf. There's no way for you to officially send PSAT scores through College Board. They don't have that option. So that's why the high school would have to send them for you. So if you don't want to wait for your SAT scores, that's fine, but it has to be your 10th grade or higher PSAT scores is my understanding, right? Would 9th grade PSAT scores work, or just they have to do 10th? 10th and beyond.
I believe it's just 10th and
I
beyond.
know. I think for Gwinnett Tech, they told me 10th or higher. So that's what I've kind of been going with. So that's something. And yes, this presentation will be uploaded to our Weebly probably later this week. Does the Atlanta campus of the perimeter campus offer organic chemistry?
So I don't know the exact curriculum, and again, like it'll be from an approved list on Georgia Future's website that we'll go based on. So I suggest looking at that first. I am also joined by Julie here from our dual enrollment office. I don't know if you can answer this question specifically, but a student wants to know if organic chem is offered at Atlanta or perimeter.
I can't. We do offer organic chemistry. I was in the middle of typing her back, or the student back. Unfortunately, Atlanta campus has different requirements for the program. So there's not an Atlanta campus perimeter program. It is either the perimeter program at one of the 5 locations that we have, or it's the Atlanta campus program. So when you're saying Atlanta of perimeter, it's kind of confusing at what campus you're asking about.
Yeah. And so when you talk about Georgia State, guys, Georgia State is a large institution, but they have a satellite campus in Alpharetta. They have a satellite campus in Dunwoody. They have a satellite campus in Clarkston, and so forth. All those satellite locations are considered perimeter because it used to be long time ago Perimeter College. And Perimeter College merged with Georgia State. And when they did that merger, they still allow for dual enrollment to take place at Perimeter. And but Perimeter is really Georgia State University. When you get your transcript, it's Georgia State University. All of it says Georgia State University. And having worked, I used to work at the Dunwoody campus as an academic advisor in my youth. And so here we are. And I feel like I'm a college advisor all over again. But you know, it's one of those things that if you choose Atlanta, you're going downtown. If you choose perimeter, you're having the campus location that's closest to our high school of the Alpharetta campus or Dunwoody or something like that. But you have the option to take an online class. The one thing I'll say about science classes, and Ms. LoCicero, you can chime in here, but just because you want to take something doesn't mean it will be available to you. It doesn't mean it's going to be scheduled at a time that's going to work with your schedule. And then anytime you take a science, you also have to take the lab that goes with it, which is a separate class. And so it's another added on responsibility and a funded class that has to happen as well. So it's really tricky to do the science classes.
And organic chemistry has prerequisites to it that you're going to have to meet before you ever get there. So there's 2 chemistry classes with labs that you have to have before you get to organic.
Yes. Yeah, you always have to meet the prerequisite. And a lot of times students may have taken an AP class, but those AP scores have to be sent and approved and everything prior to you being able to register for an upper level class. Okay, so the next question I see, does the projected student schedule section of the dual enrollment contract need to be filled out? Yes, it does. Alberto, you do have to fill out that projected schedule for us so that we know what to fund. We are funding based on what you put on that contract. So if you're going to take English 1101 in the fall and English 1102 in the spring, that is what your counselor is going to approve. So you can't then go try to register for psychology because that's not what you told us. Okay, so you absolutely need to make sure that contract is correct so that your high school counselor is going to fund the correct stuff. The next question, can current 10th graders take summer courses before junior year? That's a yes. You can, you would, as long as you are on track for graduation and we can say that you're a rising 11th grader. Yes, you can, but you need to make sure you get your contract, your application, your test scores, your transcript, everything has to be sent in. You have to get accepted before you're ever going to be able to register for those classes in your funding application. All that stuff has to be done. Alfie, do you have to pay to submit your application?
No.
So that's the ding, ding, ding. If you checked dual enrollment on your application, when you get to the payment screen, there is no payment. Okay, dual enrollment students do not have to pay for the application. When do summer classes start and end? I don't know the answer to that.
I believe June 5th, if I'm, let me look at a calendar real quick. Yeah, June 5th would be the start term for
date.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and Yusuf, the thing about summer classes and start and end dates and when does fall start and all this stuff, one of the things that I mentioned in our meeting last week, if you have not watched that presentation, I talked about it a couple of times, is the academic calendar. You need to make sure that you get familiar with the school's academic calendar. That's all your important dates, when the holidays are, when the start date is, when the withdrawal date is, when the drop date is, when classes exams are going to be. All of that is in your academic calendar. You need to know those dates. And if you're not sure where an academic calendar is, all you have to do is Google academic calendar Georgia State University and it will pop up.
I also put the link in the chat for him.
Oh, thank you so much. Okay,
You're
Guillermo, for the courses taken section on the, I'm guessing you're talking about the contract. Do I need to submit the high school classes taken so far? No, you're just talking about your schedule for next year. If you read the directions in the little paragraph before the chart, you're listing what you're planning to take for the upcoming school year. You should be looking at this year's contract and not last year's contract, which was totally different. Okay, so make sure you're looking at this year's contract. Where do we apply to take the AccuPlacer?
So that would be on our website. I can get a link for that and post it in the chat.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, for any AccuPlacer, you do have to go through the testing center at Georgia State. You choose the testing center. You cannot, and correct me if I'm wrong, ladies, you cannot register for an AccuPlacer until after you have applied. You have to apply first, and then you're allowed to do the testing.
correct. You have to have your Panther ID number to register.
Right. So don't try to register for a test until you've done your application. You won't be allowed to do that. Parthu Valuri, you need to talk to your counselor. If you're unsure about test scores, then you need to see your counselor, or you can come to one of the help sessions. We have a lot more help sessions. You're also all students are going to meet individually starting next week with their counselors to talk through schedules. So of course, bring your questions there. Can I exempt? Okay, and Julie, we do get a lot of questions about this, about the whole math thing. Can I exempt a math class using my SAT score, or do I have to take the AccuPlacer?
You can exempt with an SAT score if your math SAT is 680 or higher, or your ACT is a 29 or higher. You can exempt the placement test for Math 1111 and go straight into college algebra. Anything above college algebra, you must take the math placement exam, unless you have an AP score that gives you credit for a class higher. Okay,
perfect. Okay, and then you want to do Parthu, you want to do U.S. history in the fall, and yes, you can submit your test score if you don't get your results by March 31. It's totally fine to submit test scores after March 31st. That is not what's due by March 31st. But the sooner you get your test scores in, the sooner they can make a decision about your application. They cannot give you a yes or no whether or not you've got in or not until they have all parts of your application file: the application, the test scores, and the transcript. After that, then they can make a decision. So if your test scores are delayed, which is fine, it's fine if they're delayed, but you just won't be able to get an answer until then. Okay. Kristen. Honestly, Kristen, all the campuses are probably going to offer organic chem. It's whether or not you meet the prereq, whether or not it's going to be at the right time, whether or not it's going to line up with the rest of your schedule, whether or not everything all the stars align to make it work. Would y'all agree, ladies? Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's just yeah, you can plan for that, but anytime you do dual enrollment, what I tell students is you need to be flexible. There's no way to know. There's no way to know organic could be offered at the time you want and everything works out, but then there are no seats left. You were the last one to register and they're full. So there is no way to know until you get through the process and you try for it. You can try for it, and if it doesn't work out, then we've got to have a backup plan. Dual enrollment. Yes, classes are offered virtually. One of the things that I think is confusing for a lot of students is that, and this is a great question, but when you apply to a campus, you are not applying as to how you're going to take the class. When you apply to Perimeter, you apply to perimeter and you're admitted as a perimeter student. And then when you're registering for a class, you decide whether or not you want to go to the campus or whether or not you want to take it online.
Correct.
So it's different than, guys, when you are trying to register for a Fulton virtual class or a Georgia virtual class, and we make you turn in all this paperwork to tell us you want to do it online. It's not like that. When you get into perimeter and you're a perimeter student, you get to decide, I want to take it online or I want to try and go to the campus. So yes, classes are offered in both formats for the most part, all the typical classes.
Yes, US history is one that is usually offered online every semester.
Yeah. Yusef says, what does it mean if the class ends with a K? For example, physics 2211 and physics 2211K. That's a great question.
Yeah, the K indicates that the course and the lab are together. That class is only offered at the Atlanta campus. Perimeter does not offer any sciences with the lab course included. So for perimeter, you're always going to look for the physics 2211 class, and then there'll be a physics 2211L for the lab that you'll have to do. But the K indicates Atlanta campus.
Okay, that's really helpful. And then the other thing, Yusef, I want to say is that physics 2211 and the lab that go with it, there is a prerequisite that you have to do before you can just jump in to that physics class. So please pay attention to their course catalog, and it tells you what the prerequisites for the classes are. Okay, so Michaela says, when I called the dual enrollment admissions office for perimeter, they said they stopped taking AccuPlacer scores and only PSAT scores. Is that true?
No, it even says on our website, AccuPlacer, PSAT are all accepted, so.
Yeah, so you can do both. And do we need to schedule a meeting with our counselor to talk about what classes we want to take for dual enrollment? So Michaela, the thing about scheduling stuff, we cannot, we can't spoon feed all of the dual enrollment stuff. Like, you're going to have to read through all the stuff. You're going to have to do the legwork for it. And what it comes down to is I'm offering all these help sessions. You need to get all your questions answered. The other help sessions, the one later in February, and I'm offering one in March where you can come during your lunch period. The counselors will be available to kind of talk through individual situations. This week, we're just doing general stuff. Now, all students will come to the media center starting next week to talk through their schedules. Okay, so if you have questions, you're going to have a one-on-one with your counselor next week or the week after. It's sometime in February. Your whole English class is coming to the media center. We're going to pull you in one by one. It is a quick conversation, so be prepared with your questions. And then we're moving on to the next student. If you don't get your questions answered at that point, you need to come to one of the other help sessions that we're offering, okay? Because we can't stop what we're doing every day to answer all these individual questions about dual enrollment. I mean, like I said at the beginning, I think we had around 200 students just do Georgia State last year in the fall. There's no way for us to manage that amount of students with the number of individual questions that need to get answered. If you have more questions and your parent wants to schedule a meeting, we're doing that the last week of February. So we've kind of put out this schedule, and then hopefully between all of these, sessions, we'll get questions answered and you can talk through what you think would be ideal for your schedule. Let's see here. Harmony, you said if you want to take a certain class but it's not available, should we put up a backup course option? You're welcome to list on your course, on your dual enrollment contract, a backup option for us to fund, but then is that going to mess up your whole plan? It may be that you kind of have to plan it by, play it a little bit flexible and see what happens with the scheduling. But yes, your counselor can certainly approve an additional class. Let's see, what happens if we put the course in the contract, but then later decide we don't want to take it? Anytime you make a change, you're going to have to let your counselor know, because there's no way for us to keep track of all the changes that students want to make on a daily basis. I mean, I talked to a student yesterday, wanted to do one thing, and then today it's something different. So, we have a lot of students on our caseload, and we want to make sure that we're doing everybody what's in their best interest. But we've got to have you guys do your due diligence too and do your research on the front end. And now's the time to start planning for the year. Alfie, can we only apply to the perimeter and Atlanta campus? I'm not sure what you mean by that, Alfie. Are you talking about in terms of dual enrollment? For dual enrollment, Georgia State is one of the options. There's a whole list of schools, participating colleges. Georgia State is one of them. Gwinnett Tech is one of them. Georgia Tech is one of them. Kennesaw. I mean, you name it, there's probably a school in Georgia that does dual enrollment. Georgia State is one of the closer ones for us because they have the Alpharetta location and they also offer a lot of classes online. You've got to make that individual determination as to what school you want to apply to and what classes are going to transfer to ultimately where you want to go. If you're looking to go, out of state, then you need to do your research to see what classes are going to transfer. But it is best in terms of dual enrollment to apply to one college and let that process go through. Because once you start putting applications in at a lot of different places, there's a lot of paperwork involved and a lot of time involved in all of these things. So you really need to make some decisions prior to applying. Can current 10th graders take summer courses before junior year? We already answered that, yes. Does dual enrollment credit transfer to out-of-state universities? Does somebody want to answer that question?
I can. That will depend on the institution that you're transferring to. So you'll have to talk to them because they're out of state. Some schools will and some schools may not.
Yeah. And Alfie, you said I meant GSU. So can you only apply? Yeah. So the Atlanta campus, and I want to be clear, the Georgia State University has two main locations. I mean, you have the perimeter location and you have the downtown location. If you choose to do the downtown location, you're saying you're going to go there and physically take your classes there. That is an hour drive, even if you hop on MARTA, all that stuff. I mean, there's complications with logistics. The easiest option is to take classes through perimeter because it's just more convenient and more flexible, and they offer the online possibilities. Ultimately, it's your decision. You need to decide what's best for you as a student. Oh, the application asks you to choose between Atlanta, perimeter, Alpharetta, etc.
So if you choose Atlanta, you're applying to Atlanta. You can choose any location for perimeter and still attend any location. So if you put Alpharetta, you are not tied to Alpharetta. You can do Alpharetta classes, you can do Dunwoody classes, you can do class online, you can do a combination of classes face-to-face, classes online. You can do a science online and then have to come in for a lab because it might not be offered online. So those are, perimeter is any one of those locations. So you only have to choose one of them. But if you choose Atlanta, that is downtown, and there's no way to register for a perimeter class if you've been admitted to an Atlanta campus. And there's no way to register for Atlanta if you've been admitted to perimeter.
And I also want to say, and that's a great point, but once you select something on your application and then you change your mind later and that application has already been submitted, it is difficult, I think, to then go back and try to redo and correct that mistake. So please be sure when you're doing your application that you are being cognizant of all the things that you're checking off. The other things that are kind of important, you need to be using legal names. Don't use nicknames. Your social security number, that needs to be the correct one or else it's going to get pulled for verification. There's all kinds of little things that if you don't do them correctly, because you're applying to college, these are official documents and it needs to match up with what's on your transcript and so forth. So make sure that you're doing your best, your due diligence on your end to make sure things are accurate and correct. A couple of more questions. Somebody asked if they could do dual enrollment through UGA. UGA does have a dual enrollment program, but you cannot do it if you're a Fulton County student. That is not an option. UGA only allows a certain radius right around Athens, Clark County, to do dual enrollment. And they're very particular about that. Not anybody can just go do UGA's dual enrollment program. Jacob Kim, which one is the one that I can take online? you can take any perimeter location, you can do an online class. I think we answered that. I'm not seeing any other questions. If we have any last minute questions, we can probably take one or two more, but then this session again is recorded. It'll be posted on the Weebly, and y'all have no idea how helpful and thankful I am for y'all to take your time tonight, because then I can just say, go watch the recording where we answered the question.
I'm glad to be here, but if you get any more questions that you need help with, Elizabeth, just send me an email.
Thanks, Julie. I really appreciate you. I know this is a busy season. Okay, so I'm not seeing any other pertinent questions. We're gonna call it a night. I'm gonna stop the recording here. I do appreciate everybody that decided to come out tonight.